And greetings, fellow travelers on the starship known as Planet Earth, and welcome to the Captain Fizz and Mask Guy podcast. I, of course, am El Hombre Loco Enmascarado, better known as that Mask Guy, and the yin to my yang,
Captain Fizz.
Yes, Captain Fizz.
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 Fizz. Yes.
And welcome to the 8th episode.
Which, I don't really know. I think once you get to the 8th, it's kind of downhill from there. I mean, look at all the movie franchises. By the time they get to the 8th movie, no one really cares.
Has there ever been an 8th movie?
Well, I know in a lot of horror franchises there are.
Those are remakes. They do not count. They do not exist. They do not...
Well, I don't know. I mean, Friday the 13th, I think, Freddy's Dead was like part 8, wasn't it?
First of all, Freddy was
Nightmare on Elm Street. Never mind.
Wow, we really need a horror,
Well,
expert
you know what?
on this show.
I've been in discussions with a friend of mine who lives out of town, and he says that if he can come in, around Halloween, he'll be more than happy to.
That'll be an extra special Captain Fizz Mask Guy and whatchamacallit podcast.
Whatchamacallit? I don't know. I mean, at this point,
he has no name.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he has liked to refer to himself as being Sweet Daddy D, and I'm not talking about Jeff Dunham's mannequin. My friend has actually been using that moniker for a long time before that.
Although he does kind of resemble a mannequin. In a little bit.
I would disagree with you, but...
He loves me, I can say it.
He's a mannequin. Is sort of mannequin-like.
Yes. They could put him inside a store window and nobody would tell the difference. Until he moved, because he can't stand still. He can't stand still, no.
I mean, he would probably tell you that he'd be more than happy to work as a ventriloquist dummy as long as you don't try to stick your hand up his posterior.
Yeah, that's kind of the downside.
Yeah, that is really.
So we have a very big show. We have a lot to cram into a very short period of time.
And so, I mean, I guess first off I should, I'll say, how are you doing? Because I actually haven't seen you in a few days, which feels kind of weird.
I know, I've been hibernating and... It feels good to avoid the smoky air.
Yeah, it's, for whatever reason, all across the Canadian prairies, it's been really smoky.
For once, we equal Toronto.
And it's really weird. My sister, though, she lives in Alberta, and she's come to visit this week. And the air quality where she lives, which is in Fort McMurray with her husband, is much worse than it is here in Winnipeg.
I can only imagine. But to me, it's about equal.
Because you've never been to Fort Mac.
I have been to Fort Mac. It was a long time ago.
Okay. So while you've been hibernating, I've been getting into some other stuff. I've tried to get it into Hellblazer, the comics. I got a graphic novel from the library, but I couldn't really get into it. So
it's a very hard one to get into.
I don't know. It's maybe the same reason why I don't really like horror movies is, when you go off and you start doing the supernatural and start adding like little children, that's kind of where I kind of draw the line.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart.
No, absolutely not. So I'm actually starting to read Jim Henson's latest biography, which I'm a huge Muppet fan. I've been a Muppet fan ever since I first saw the Muppets back when I was like 4 or 5.
I won't call myself a Muppet fan, but Miss Piggy has always been my favorite.
I don't know. I think my favorite has always been like Ralph the dog and Animal.
Ralph the dog.
The dog.
That just sounds like a dog puking.
That may have been where Jim Henson came up with the name for it. As far as I know, it's actually the oldest. Another thing I've really been getting into lately is they haven't done any new episodes, but if you go to Crack.com's YouTube page, they did a series of videos, about 15, called After Dark, or After Hours, excuse me. And it's where they just sit around and they talk about movies and theories that they have about movies. They do a whole one where they try to suggest that every movie that Pixar does is in the same universe. And that it starts off, I guess, with Brave, and it actually ends with WALL-E.
It could possibly work out that way.
Well, if you go through it, the toys are alive, and so eventually, what we see as you go through it is eventually, there's cars and there's no humans, and then at the end of it, you see the humans returning to Earth, and so they kind of suggested that somewhere along the line, the machines rebelled against man, chased them off the planet by destroying it, and then eventually they realized that, much like Woody and Buzz Lightyear they wanted someone to quote-unquote play with them. And so they needed man to come back. And so that's where the world, ends with WALL-E.
That's a very unique, twisted way to look at Pixar.
It is.
A family-friendly movie company.
And, they did on a whole nother one about how Star Wars is racist and how the droids are all just slaves.
That is not true. R2-D2 has never been a slave.
Well, they have restraining bolts. And so that's kind of like, shackling up a droid.
I refuse to see such a thing. They are white.
Okay.
And gold. And, I'm sorry. The droids are treated like humans
I don't want to get too... Oh, they're not. Come on. They refer to everyone as being like master. But...
Well, that's programming. You can't slave something
but they're programmed to have emotions, and they're programmed to have pain, as it showed in Return of the Jedi. But you know what? We don't really have time to go up and get too much into this.
No, we do not.
I do suggest go to crack.com's YouTube page and look up the After Hour videos. I've been watching these several a day, and I love them. They're really great. And of course, I've been playing a little bit of Skyrim as well,
which I apparently have not been.
Well, you've been sick.
I've been lacking on the Skyrim department.
You've been sleeping a lot, from what I understand.
Sleep is good. It's a sign of old age, and I'm enjoying it.
Actually, from what I understand, the older you get, the less sleep you actually need.
I call BS on that.
Oh, no, I've heard about this. There's actually a theory that as you get older, you actually need less sleep. But because, as people get older, they do less. They end up sleeping because they're bored. And then they need to get medications to help them sleep at night. So they
I'm the exception. I was able to sleep almost all day and at night.
Which, for you, is quite odd, because you've actually had...
I can barely sleep most days.
Exactly, so maybe your body's finally going off and...
My body has turned around and told me it hates me, and I'm all perfectly okay with that. Because it means I can sleep. And be happy sleeping. But, anyways, big news with San Diego Comic-Con. They've released the movie lineup they're doing, and special guests. I did not write them all down, because honestly, we don't have enough time to say every single person actually appearing at one of the biggest comic conventions.
This is huge. San Diego... There's actually a couple that are starting to get actually bigger.
Yes.
But, and this has led to some...
Conflicts.
I know the San Diego Comic-Con's owners are actually trying to sue, I think it's the Salt Lake City's Comic-Con.
Salt Lake Comic-Con.
And it's all about the term Comic-Con and how they believe they own the rights to.
I think
the hyphenated version of it. It's comic, that little dash... Con, and that's apparently what...
I think it's pathetic. I think all comic conventions should be branded under the same name.
But they're not all under the same owners.
That's besides the point. Work together. We need all of them to work together to bring what we, the fans, enjoy. Comics.
But here's the thing, though. If San Diego Comic-Con is successful in this would have a big impact on so many... any other, a comic book convention that actually uses the term Comic-Con. For instance, in Winnipeg, they have the Central Canadian Comic Con, in which we just commonly refer to here as C4.
Yes.
And, that would be...
Not dynamite.
Not dynamite. And so this could have some huge implications, although, I mean, if you come to, C4, you'll see it's the C4. It doesn't actually have...
Yeah, we do not acknowledge the Comic-Con.
I mean...
We the people say Comic-Con.
We the people, but, I mean, they went off and, they labeled themselves as being C4 these days.
We the people have no voice. So, but San Diego has been renewed till, I believe, 2019. So that's a huge thing. So they'll be staying in San Diego, which is good.
Which is great for San Diego.
For San Diego. I wish the success that San Diego is having over the last few years starts spreading to the other ones, and that's why I like to see them all branded under one. Well,
here's the thing, and I'm kind of taking away from what we're trying to do here, but
it all works together.
At one point, C4 was actually owned by a company that owned a bunch of different ones, so they actually tried to get on the same page as the other ones. Unfortunately, we were being treated as the redheaded stepchild, and so they actually broke away and went back on their own.
I don't. My theory is not so much all of them owned by the same people, but a collective agreement between them saying, okay, you know what, this one needs more unique guests. They're getting the same guests over and over and over again.
It is a little frustrating because we've had a couple of guests who've come in a couple times, and I haven't went to Comic-Con partly because I didn't want to go off and get the same person's autograph twice.
It gets repetitive and it gets a little frustrating when you're seeing the same people.
I mean, we have had like Patrick Stewart, we've had Billy D. Williams, who I'm actually quite frustrated because I never got a chance to get his autograph. William Shatner was here, and
Shatner.
But I mean, there's people that I would have loved to, Mark Hamill and Terry Fisher in particular.
Oh, there's a lot of names out there that they focus on San Diego so much, and they need to start spreading the love.
So, and again,
comic love and movie love is not just in San Diego anymore; it is worldwide.
Well, absolutely. Speaking of the Salt Lake City's Comic-Con. From what I understand, they're actually almost to the point where they're actually almost bigger than San Diego's. Yep. So
I think that's the reason San Diego's getting mad at them.
And I think that's the real reason why they're going after them is because it's fear that eventually they'll be overtaken by Salt Lake City. And there's the one in Toronto, which doesn't even call itself a Comic-Con.
The one in Toronto is a very unique oddball. I don't know what they call themselves, but they don't really base themselves on just comics anymore. In the past, they've had Twilight stars there. They've had a lot of movies that aren't comic related, which is very confusing. It brings in fans, but I think it brings in the wrong, the wrong eyes. We need to boost comics and all that.
Fan Expo. That's what they call themselves. Fan Expo Canada.
So they've gone the direction away from Comic-Con, which is kind of sad. Toronto has the potential of being such a huge thing.
It should be. I mean, it honestly could be Canada's version of the San Diego Comic-Con if they do it.
I've been to the comic convention. I can't remember what they called it, but the one in Edmonton. It was unique, to say the least. They had tattoo artists in the building.
I've heard of some...
It was a very unique experience. It cost a lot to get in, but it was entertaining. The guests was kind of lackluster, but the comics was galore. And they start, unlike Winnipeg, where we separate anime and comics, Edmonton actually combined them.
It's actually... I'm actually Googling this, so we actually sound semi-intelligent. Edmonton just refers to theirs as being the Edmonton Expo.
The Edmonton Expo.
Expo. Which is... The full name is the Edmonton Comic and Entertainment Expo. But they just they've shortened it to Edmonton Expo.
Okay, that's a unique way to look at it. But anyways, so, Canada has some unique ones. we need the guests. Like, I think that's a huge part of bringing in all the people. And San Diego, obviously, I think goes a lot longer than just a weekend.